Hey, what's up, everybody? It is Soda Tsudo, the Newidifer, or you could just call me the Newidifer. Um, how's it been, you guys? It's been a little, while since I posted. Probably gonna, be longer since my editor takes a very long time to edit the video. No shade. I'm gonna be trying something a little different this video. This is what if Deku was a demon? Specifically, the aspect of demon that I'm adding in is from Meliodas from the Seven Deadly Sins. If you guys have any questions on how his quirk's gonna work or how things go on, because I'm doing it a little different than I normally do, ask me inside the comments. Also, inside of the description, if you look down there, there is my Discord, my friend's Discord, and my two friends' YouTube channels. So if you guys want to go and show them some love, you know, I'd appreciate it. So, without a further ado, let's get straight into it. So, look, right? Azuku is kind of, jumping up and down inside of his room as Inko comes in, as she says, "What are you causing all that noise for?" As Azuku, turns around, looking jolly as hell, smiling very wide, as he says, "I'm watching All Might's debut video." As she kind of, looks at him and she says, "Oh, you are?" As he kind of nods as she says, "Well, just make sure you have everything ready because in a little bit we're going to go and we're going to go and see the quirk doctor to go and see what your quirk is." As, Azuku's kind of, tweaking out a little bit, jumping up and down even harder. As Inko kind of, laughs as she says, "I understand that you're excited, but you got to calm down. You might knock over some of your All Might trophies or action figures, dolls. I don't know what they call them nowadays." As, Azuku's kind of just, sitting there, not even really paying attention to her, as he's just excited for the prospect of being able to have a quirk. As, he kind of finishes the video and everything like that, as he gets himself dressed and they go ahead and go out. So, they get inside the car, they drive over, as when they eventually get over, they have him do an x-ray and they put him through a couple more tests to see potentially what his quirk may be. They have him do things like go inside of a swimming pool to see if it's water related, involving controlling the water or even, being able to grow gills to be able to breathe into the water. They have him inside of situations like lifting up weights to see how easily that is. They even, take his blood and everything, and they, test like small little tests to see if maybe it's super durability. As after a while of tests, the doctor kind of looks at Inko as he says, "As far as what we can see, we don't notice anything inside of Izuku. So, um, wait right here and we're going to go and get the doctor." As, Inko kind of frowns as she says, "Is something wrong?" As he says, "Don't worry, there's probably nothing wrong with him. It's just probably the fact that his quirk is harder to notice than other things. Um, just I'll be right back with you. I'm gonna go and get the doctor." As, he kind of rushingly walks off. As Azuku kind of, looks a little worried. As Inko kind of looks down at him as she says, "Don't worry about it. It's probably nothing. They probably got one of the tests wrong, or maybe your quirk is something, very, very unique that they just can't find yet." As, Izuku kind of just looks at her as he kind of has a frown on his face as he says, "What if I have a lame quirk?" As, Inko kind of, frowns as she says, "What do you mean by lame?" As, Izuku says, "Well, what I've heard from Bakugo is sometimes children develop quirks that are completely different than either of their parents. It's rare, but usually or sometimes it can happen." As, Inko says, "So what are you worrying about?" As he kind of looks down, as he kind of fidgets with his fingers, as he says, "What if my quirk is something useless like stretching my fingers or being able to grow my nails out?" As, Inko kind of looks down at him as she kind of pats him on the head as he slowly looks up. She gives him, a warm smile as she says, "I mean, quirks aren't about how cool they look. They're not about how flashy they are. They're about how you use them." And, you know, even then, even if it does seem lame to you, you never know. You could use the quirk for a multitude of things. There's a whole bunch of things in new jobs that people with very specific quirks can do. And there's a lot more demand from it since it's been a while since quirks have been around. So luckily, there's a lot of jobs inside the market that can even take things for quirks that may seem a little bit more useless to the average person. As, he kind of smiles type shit. As he kind of says, "So you think my quirk can be useful?" As she kind of, nods at him and she says, "Of course it can." As, he kind of, you know, gives her like a small little head nod as he kind of looks back down. Time skip you know, a little later type as Azuku and Inko are standing in front of the doctor. As the doctor blatantly says, "Look, kid, it's just not going to happen." As Azuku kind of, like freezes as he drops his toy on the ground. As Inko kind of, looks at him and she says, "What do you mean it's not going to happen?" As the doctor kind of says, throughout the years that quirks have been around, there's been a variety of tests that have been taken to determine whether or not people with quirks have different levels of tells past just their normal abilities. Because every quirk is unique and different based off of the certain person, we can't use the same tests for every person to know if they have a quirk. So we had to start taking all different types of tests to, you know, check to see what may be a common thing that comes with everybody that has a quirk, if there is something like that. As, Inko kind of says, "And?" As the doctor kind of sighs as he says, "Look, for those that have a quirk, we've noticed that there's a extra bone inside of the foot that is missing from those that do have a quirk than those that do not. Izuku, unfortunately, has this extra bone, meaning he does not have a quirk." As she kind of says, are you sure that happens 100% of the time? Like, what if it's a situation where he did develop a quirk and we just don't know? And he has that extra bone. What if it's just a coincidence?" As he kind of looks at her, as, he kind of gives it to her straight as he says, "Miss Midoriya, we've never had a case like that. Ever. The chances that for some reason with Izuku, there's some type of random change that's not within every other person on the planet that has a quirk is unlikely. If we did see something like this, not even just in Japan, but all of the entire planet, something inside of the medical field would have been brought up and it would have been brought to my attention or one of my colleagues' intentions or attentions, my bad. Bless me. But nah, he kind of looks at her as he says, "As far as I can tell, Izuku does not seem like he's going to have a quirk. So the chances of him being a hero are extremely low." As, she kind of frowns, as she kind of looks down, kind of feeling like she also failed him. So the doctor looks at her and she says, "But it isn't like he couldn't do anything to help people. For example, um, he could become something like a police officer or a firefighter. he could become a multitude of things that help people day to day. It's just he's not going to become a hero. As she kind of, frowns a little harder, she says, "Okay." As Izuku's just kind of still looking down, as Inko kind of, moves her fingers as she floats the toy back into her hand, as she, gives her other hand to Izuku. As, he kind of quietly takes her hand. As she looks back at the doctor, she says, "Thank you for telling us this." So he says, "No problem, man." So Izuku and Inko kind of get into the car as they drive back, it being a very, 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 very quiet drive back. And past this point, everything goes to canon. So look, right? Izuku's running down the street. As while he's running down the street, he's kind of, freaking out at the fact that he's going to be late to class. As he's kind of trying to dodge in between person to person. As while he's trying to dodge in between person to person, he kind of stops as he sees an explosion happen. As when he kind of looks up, he kind of sees a giant villain on top of a train station. As, he kind of looks up inside of amazement as, people around him start to say that apparently the guy that's right here is or was trying to steal from someone, but he kind of got cornered by a hero and he let his quirk loose. So now it's an entire battle between hero and villain. As, as everybody is looking at this, Izuku's just kind of, geeking out on some as he's kind of writing down notes on everything that the heroes are doing. As he kind of is taking these notes and everything, he's looking at the situation as he looks back down. As soon as he looks back up, he kind of sees Mount Lady kind of drop kick the villain and take away some shine from a different hero. As, Izuku kind of, looks at this in shock and everything. As he looks down at his watch as he realizes he has to get to class. So he kind of runs off. As eventually when he runs off, he ends up having to take an entirely different way to school due to the fact that the villain fell inside of his path. As Izuku's walking to school, or running to school, I should say, he kind of hears another explosion. As he kind of, stops as he kind of trips up a little bit. As when he gets up, he sees the entire area in front of him is just completely collapsed. As Izuku kind of looks around as he says, is there another villain fight? As, he kind of hears a person from beside him say, "Not exactly." So he kind of looks over as he sees a person inside of an orange vest as he says, "What's happening here then?" As the dude kind of sighs as he says, "Apparently we were called over here for a situation of a potential sinkhole that could have formed inside of the ground. We tried to block off the area, but people didn't listen. Due to that and people walking on the area, it caused a level of strain on the ground and it kind of gave in." As Izuku kind of, looks at him as he says, "Is everybody down there okay?" As he kind of nods as he says, "As far as what we can see, since we had a couple people in the area, nobody's been seriously hurt." As he says, "Wait, what do you mean nobody's been seriously hurt? Didn't this just happen?" As, the dude kind of sighs as he says, "Oh, okay, you're not very smart." As Izuku's just kind of looking at him in confusion, as he sees from the bottom of the sinkhole two like small orbs fly from out of that, giant sinkhole. As he sees those two giant orbs land on these like almost whole things on top of the dude's hard hat as they kind of click onto it. As he says, I was using my quirk to look down there. A couple of us have similar abilities that allow us to be able to scout an area. We, we predicted the fact that people weren't going to listen and we're probably going to push through anyway. We tried to tell management to get some police down here and maybe some people that can make a small border, but they didn't want to listen and they cheaped out. So it caused all of this to happen. As, Izuku kind of, laughs as he kind of rubs the back of his head as he says, "Yeah, I'm sorry about all of that." As the dude just kind of sighs as he says, "Listen, kid, I don't want your excuses. Can you just get out of here?" As Izuku kind of jumps as he says, "Oh, I was actually going to tell you that my class is this way." As the dude kind of looks at Izuku in annoyance as he says, "Looks like you're going to have to find another way around." As Izuku says, "But the only other way around is if I go all the way around, the neighborhood. And that's going to take me another 30 minutes to an hour." So the dude kind of just shrugs as he says, "Not my problem, kid. Either you can go or you cannot. I really don't care either way." As Izuku kind of, sighs as he kind of begins to run his way over to the other side of the neighborhood. As Izuku kind of thinks to himself, why are people so goddamn mean? Eventually, after a while of running, Izuku eventually, starts to get closer to the school. As while he's running up to the school and everything, right, he kind of hears something inside of an alley. As, he kind of stops as he looks over. So he says, "Did I just hear something?" As he hears what sounds like another rustling inside of the alley. As Izuku, just jumps a little. As he takes a few steps back. As he kind of looks left and right. And against his better judgment, he eventually goes in and checks everything. When he checks everything, he sees that it looks like a couple of trash cans knocked over or whatever. Doesn't look like anything too serious. He sees a few stray cats inside the alley. He sees them run out of the alley as, he kind of sighs as he says, "Of course I decided to check here. It was dangerous in the first place just in case anything was hiding in here in the first place. And then on top of that, it shaved off like 2 minutes that I could have used to be running." As, he kind of goes to turn away. As when he goes to turn away, he hears a raspy voice, say help from underneath him. As he kind of looks down and backs up. As when he looks down and backs up, he doesn't see anybody directly beneath him. As Izuku's just kind of looking all over the place as he says, "Is somebody here?" As he's just kind of, looking around trying to find where the voice came from. As he hears from the raspy voice, kind of inside of a very quiet, hoarse way, "Down here." As when he kind of looks down, he sees what looks to be a black portal and a person completely drenched in shadows crawling from underneath. But what's weird about him is it looks like a person, but at the exact same time of looking like a person, it doesn't have any physical features. It has red eyes, more specifically, white pupils, and it's drenched in darkness, almost as if the night sky had been cloaked around him. It almost looks non-physical inside of a certain way. As Izuku, kind of takes a couple steps back as he prepares to run away, as he hears the voice say, "Please help me." As he kind of looks at him as he says, are you Are you hurt? As the voice kind of quietly says, come closer. As Azuku kind of, takes a few steps back, as he says, how do I know I'm able to trust you? You could be some type of villain. I mean, you look like you have a villain quirk. As he hears the hoarse voice say, please. As Azuku kind of, looks left and right behind him too to make sure nobody's coming from behind him or anything like that. As he reluctantly goes ahead and reaches his hand forward. As he goes ahead and reaches his hand forward, he kind of turns the person over as he sees their stomach, their body as a whole. It looks like a dark abyss with almost a purple and demonic color coming off of it. It feels evil. Not just inside of the way that it looks, but it's almost like he can feel there's a level of malice to it. A level of just complete darkness, almost like chaos. As, Azuku kind of looks at the dude as he says, what happened to you? You don't look hurt. As the person just kind of closes its eyes. As Azuku kind of looks at the person as he says, hey, are you okay? I'm gonna call the police. As he kind of goes to reach for his phone, as when he takes out his phone, he gets grabbed by the shoulder. As soon as he's grabbed by the shoulder, his vision goes completely red. As when his vision goes red, he sees flashes of darkness. He sees demons within almost this other realm walking, almost like an army. He sees people fighting against these demons, but those said demons then proceeding to almost completely conquer and defeat those people easily. As he looks through this dreamscape or this vision, he looks up as he notices the sky's red. As when he kind of notices the sky's red or whatever, he looks back down as he notices he's actually here. This isn't like some type of dream or anything like that. As Azuku kind of falls to his knees as he begins to cough, as he notices the air almost feels like poison. It has a scratchy consistency, like it's polluted but beyond repair. As when he begins to, cough and everything, he spits up a little bit of blood. As when he spits up this blood, he kind of looks inside of his hand. And as he looks inside of his hand, he sees a face looking back at him. The face doesn't have any features, but it's almost like this face is looking through him. Like it's judging him, but he doesn't understand how. As without a single movement from this face, he hears, almost like it's from everywhere, what is your name? As Azuku kind of, looks around as he's kind of confused, as he hears the voice say down here. As when he looks down at his hand, he notices the face is almost closer inside of his blood. As Azuku reluctantly says, my name's Azuku Midoriya. As when he says this, the voice says, you were very brave for coming here, Azuku. As he kind of looks confused as he says, I don't even know how I got here. Who are you? Are you some type of villain or something? As the voice kind of stays silent for a couple of seconds. As it says, I'm no villain. At least not inside of the traditional sense. As Azuku kind of, pauses as he says, What do you mean, not in the traditional sense? As the voice, almost buried inside of silence for what seems like an extremely long time, eventually answers. As the voice says, I'm not evil, but I'm not good. As Azuku says, well, if you're not good, doesn't that make you a bad person? As when he says this, Azuku almost feels as though someone grabs his heart, as he kind of grabs his chest and falls to the ground. As Azuku starts screaming, as the voice says, I'll use your body wisely. But as it suddenly stops, as he says, what? As soon as he hears that noise, he instantly wakes up. As when he wakes up, he kind of, sees paramedics around him as they're shining a light inside of his eyes. As Azuku kind of, looks around and jumps out of the medical bed, or not necessarily a medical bed, but a gurney. As everybody's kind of, looking at him as they say, um, are, are you okay? As Azuku's just kind of sitting there. She looks left, he looks right. He just kind of reluctantly, almost delayed, he stands out of bed. As the medical staff is just looking at him like he's crazy. As Azuku looks over at the medical staff as he says, where am I? As they say, you called the police. As Azuku kind of, looks at them as he says, I did? They kind of nod as they're like, yeah, you said someone was injured and that you needed help. And then the line went dead. As Azuku says, I was gonna call the police, but I didn't get a chance to. Someone grabbed me. As one of the paramedics kind of, walk up as they're like, are you saying someone attacked you? As Azuku kind of looks back at him as he says, I mean, they didn't attack me necessarily. It was more like they grabbed me. As, the paramedic kind of says, you sure you don't need some more tests or anything like that? As Azuku kind of, takes a few steps back as he says, no, I'm not crazy. There was somebody there and they like grabbed me. It was like sudden. As they kind of, look at him as they say, yeah, I think we should take you back to the hospital and get you checked because there was nobody in that alley. As Azuku kind of, looks at him as he says, no, there was. I don't know if they used their quirk on me or something to knock me out, but there was someone there. As a different, paramedic kind of walks up as they say, okay, first off, if there was a villain, why would they knock you out for no reason? Second off, think to yourself, if they did knock you out for some reason, why would they leave you completely unharmed? As Azuku kind of, looks at them as he says, well, what if they wanted to do something to me? They look at you, or as they look at him, as they're like, nobody did anything to you. What do you mean? I was grabbed. You weren't grabbed. But I felt it. No, you didn't. You're probably going through a slight bit of psychosis from suddenly passing out. My quirk allows me to replay events. I replayed the events out of that alley and nobody attacked you. You just passed out. There was nobody else there in that alley except a couple of cats. Izuku kind of, looks up at them as he kind of says, "What do you mean?" "I mean, you imagined it." "Oh, okay. Um, oh, I gotta get to class." As they kind of look at him as they step forward, as they're like, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa. We need to get you checked out first." As Izuku kind of, says, I'll take your card. I'll let you call my mom, whatever you need to do, but I can't go. I got to get to class. This is really, really important. I have a very important test today." As they kind of sigh, as they say, "Okay, take my card." As Izuku, reluctantly takes the card, as they say, "If you notice anything weird about what the hell happened with you, call us. But if not, make sure to at least contact us and tell us that you're okay." As Azuku kind of, nods, as he kind of runs off of the back of the ambulance. As when he gets out and everything, he kind of, runs into the classroom and everything. As soon as he gets there, he says, "Okay, I'm here on time." As as soon as he says that, he hears the bell ring. As he sees everybody get up and kind of walk out of the room. As Azuku's kind of looking at this situation confused as he doesn't know what. As he says, "Huh?" As the teacher kind of looks at him as he says, "Yeah, you missed the entire class." As Azuku says, What do you mean? I had like an hour to spare." As the teacher says, "Well, I don't know if your clock's wrong, but you've been missing for the last 2 hours of this class." As Azuku kind of, looks at the teacher as he says, "I was?" As he says, "Yeah, that's what I just said. You missed everything. I called roll and everything. Look, if you're not getting enough sleep or something like that, or something's going on at home, you can talk to me about it." As Azuku kind of, shakes his head as he says, "No, it wasn't that. I passed out a couple houses back and I woke up in the ambulance." As, the teacher kind of looks at him as they say, Well, I don't once again know what to tell you, but look, what I'll do is I'll set up a day on the weekend. And during this day, I'll allow you to take the test again. Just just make sure you're getting more sleep and go to the hospital if you need to." As Azuku kind of, looks at him as he nods. So he kind of pats him on the shoulder as he says, "Okay, now you need to get to your next class." As Azuku kind of, looks at him as he nods and he goes ahead to the next class. Okay, so look, right? As Azuku's sitting inside the next class listening to the teacher talk about economics, he's kind of slowly drifting off. But it doesn't feel like drifting off like falling asleep. It feels more like he's blinking and then minutes are passing. And every single time that he does this, it almost feels like his body's moving inside of different ways. He finds himself sitting and, you know, completely like, it seems like his positions that he's sitting in and moving in are changing every single time that he closes his eyes. As eventually, by the end of the school day, everything more or less goes to plot. As Zuko kind of, walks out of the classroom or whatever. As while he's walking out of the classroom, he's kind of sad as he walks over to the fountain and gets his book away from the pond with the fishes eating on it. As Izuku kind of thinks to himself, I don't understand why Bakugo told me to kill myself. If I actually did it, he'd get in trouble. As he kind of, frowns to himself. As, like in canon, Izuku's kind of, walking his way home. As when he's walking his way home, he kind of, is talking to himself as he's like, if All Might was inside the situation, he wouldn't feel bad. He'd stand tall, smile, and start laughing. As, when Izuku's, kind of doing that as he's walking through the hallway, he hears something behind him. As when Izuku kind of, turns around to check what it is, he sees a giant villain made out of what looks to be some type of sludge or slime or something behind him, as it's kind of towering over him. As Izuku's heart completely skips a beat, as he kind of, goes to back up and run away. As soon as he goes to back up and run away, he loses consciousness. As he wakes up, he kind of finds himself walking away as he completely stops. As when he kind of completely stops, he notices that he's across the tunnel. As he kind of freaks out as he goes to, check his surroundings, as he's like, how did I get here? As when he's checking his surroundings and everything like that, he's kind of looking around as he's noticing he's almost like halfway across. Not the bridge, but almost halfway across to the next part of sorry, I'm brain farting. He's almost completely to the next part of the sidewalk that he was walking on, which is unusual since he was just under the bridge. As Izuku doesn't really think too much about it, as he kind of shrugs and makes his way home. So, flashback to what happened. As the sludge villain kind of is towering over Izuku, he kind of sees Izuku go from extremely scared and cowering, shaking, like shivering, almost like a rattlesnake's tail rattling. He just sees him get almost unnervingly calm. As when he sees him get unnervingly calm, he kind of notices that Izuku's not even running anymore. As the sludge villain off of instinct jumps back. As when the sludge villain jumps back, he looks at Izuku and he looks nothing like he was before. I mean, he does, but it's unnatural. He looks calm. He doesn't look attacked, or he doesn't look like he's afraid in any way anymore. He's just staring at him with dark, empty eyes. Izuku had dark eyes before, right? But not that dark. When he looks him in the eyes, it's almost like he's looking into the night sky without a moon. As the sludge villain kind of laughs as he says, "You scared me there for a second, kid." As when he looks at Izuku's just staring at him, not saying anything. So you're not going to say anything? Why would I say anything? As when he says that, the sludge villain kind of, takes a couple more steps back as Izuku slowly begins to step towards it. As he says, "What the hell happened?" As Izuku's just kind of walking towards him quietly. As he says, "It seems as though this kid's body that I took over, it's a lot more resistant than I thought it was. Usually, if I tried to take over anybody's body, it would be easy, effortless. As while he's saying that, he's still stepping towards the sludge villain. As the sludge villain's kind of, beginning to, slide back, as he kind of turns his head at the sludge villain as he says, "Why are you running? I thought that you were going to attack him." As the sludge villain kind of looks at him as he says, "What do you mean, attack him?" As Izuku's still stepping, as eventually he stops moving, as he tilts his head a little bit more, as he says, "I guess the people in this world really are stupid. It's unfortunate. Lord have mercy when I show up." As he lifts his hand up, as when he lifts his hand up, the sludge villain goes to scream. As when he goes to scream, a a purple and black fireball shoots out from Izuku's hand and completely submerges the sludge villain inside of flames. As Izuku's just kind of standing there quietly, as he's expending the fire from his hands. As whilst he's doing that, his fingernails then begin to burn up, and his fingers and skin around his hands are almost scorching. As he looks over at his hand as he says, "I guess in this body, it's less resistant to my magic than my other body was. That's unfortunate. That means I'm going to have to train this." As he kind of, puts his hand down. As when he puts his hand down, he sees the sludge villain almost 4 times the size smaller than it was before. As he kind of looks at the sludge villain as he says, "That and my physical power seems to have diminished." Okay, that's fine. So he kind of puts his hand inside of his jacket pocket as he kind of begins to walk towards the sludge villain. As the sludge villain, begins to almost like slide back across the ground out of fear. As he says, "It looks like I'm going to have to kill you the traditional way." As soon as he says that, he sees All Might jump out from the sewer line. As almost in a unamused way looks up at him as All Might falls down. As All Might says, "Have no fear, for I am here." As when he says that, he kind of pauses as he realizes the sludge villain is damn near almost like a water bottle sized amount of sludge. As Izuku just kind of looks at All Might as he says, "Who are you?" As, All Might kind of takes a few steps back out of, shock as he says, "Do you not recognize me? I'm All Might, the #1 hero." The #1 who now? The #1 hero. Oh. Okay. You can deal with this thing. As when he kind of says that, he kind of turns around and walks away. As All Might kind of looks at him in shock, just confused at what the hell happened. As All Might kind of says, "Wait, I thought that you were going to ask for an autograph." As he says, "Huh? Oh, okay." Izuku kind of turns around as he walks right back over to All Might. So he says, "My bad. I used to get this all the time." As he opens his notebook, writes All Might an autograph, and hands the piece of paper to him. As he kind of smiles at him, as he pats him on the shoulders, he says, "Hey, don't go around, selling that." As he kind of walks away without any context. As All Might's just standing there looking shocked. As after a while of walking, eventually All Might kind of, swallows his pride gets up the sludge villain as he jumps away. As soon as he jumps away, Izuku's body begins to almost twitch as he snaps back to where we were before. As he then eventually goes home. So, as Izuku is walking home and everything like that, he kind of, places his keys on, on the table and everything, and he begins to undress and everything. As he's kind of laying down in bed thinking about how weird of a day it was today. As Izuku kind of, begins to wind down and everything, as he says, I don't know why I'm losing so much time. Maybe I should go to the hospital. I heard cases of dementia start like this. As he kind of closes his eyes and he eventually drifts off to sleep. Okay, you guys, this is where I'm going to leave this part off. If you guys enjoyed, please leave a like, subscribe, or comment. Make sure you check out the community tab because I usually have votes on everything over there. And yeah, if you guys really like this part, tell me in the comments and everything, and tell me that you want a part 2. If you guys didn't, I'll try something new. So yeah, I appreciate all of you guys, and I'll see you later.